Hello indie game fan, it's the first big week of new releases with some huge indie games of note, including roguelite, strategy titles, and a Metroidvania, so let's begin with Final Night, a roguelite beat-em-up that combines the classic side-scrolling action with procedural generation and endless replayability. This has a classic fantasy theme in which you are commanding a party of characters such as Ranger, Assassin, and more to take on enemies and gigantic bosses, having to find and exploit their weaknesses in order to take them down. The minute-to-minute action looks fun, in part due to the swarm of smaller enemies that the game throws at you, which you can absolutely demolish, contrasted with the more challenging, larger bosses. There are many upgrade systems for the party, including their equipment and abilities, along with powerful relics and more, and looks like it's off to a great start in early access. I thought it was quite strange that developer Placeholder Gameworks, best known for Death and Taxes, had two games scheduled for January, but they did push Craft to February instead, which leaves us with Broken Alliance, a Heroes of Might and Magic style turn-based strategy game, complete with hex grid-based combat, overworld exploration and castle building, and looks to be a fairly faithful tribute to the classic series. Similarly, this also has a fantasy theme set on a world on the verge of collapse due to the overuse of magic, but might be a little bit smaller in scope with just 4 playable factions, although at launch only one of these will be playable, but if you love HOMM like me, this should be of interest. Love indie games? Sign up to my newsletter to get a weekly dose of what's hot, along with some news and of course, weekly game giveaways, so if interested, link is in the description below. I'm not quite sure why Chinese developers like their anthropomorphic furry characters seen in games like Mercury Abbey from last year, so if any of you know why, please let me know in the comments below, with another such title of interest being Threefold Recital. This is an adventure platformer that stars 3 characters, a wolf monk, a fox priest, and a snake artist, who have to work together to unravel a mysterious conspiracy. This is set in an oriental fantasy world that mixes magic, modern and ancient technology, so it has an interesting setting where the world is on a decline on the back of a golden age which has lasted thousands of years. The 3 characters have different abilities, including being able to see and sever karma threads, transmutation of substances, and the ability to enter paintings and alter the appearance of others. So I'm thinking some sort of Lost Vikings style element to the puzzle solving and exploration. And while you do move by platforming around, I don't believe there's any combat in this and is an adventure game through and through. After a little bit of a delay, we also have the launch of Dreaming Owls this week, a
farm simulation RPG
that sees you, a lost mariner, finding yourself on the shores of an abandoned island, coming across a dilapidated farm which you can restore to its former glory. However, on top of the farming elements, this has high seas adventuring as well, with Zelda-style exploration and combat as you use your farm as a home base to go out and explore neighbouring islands and to get to know the other people living in the area. There are 2 main factions here in the Pirates and one known as Global Trade, where you can side with either and thus have a relationship and romance system with NPCs as well, and refreshingly will not be an early access release. Hot off the presses is the news that the multiplayer social deduction game MISTERY is releasing this week, but it will be on the 19th, which is a Sunday, at 6 PM PST, which seems like a strange choice since game releases tend to be on weekdays, so let's see if this strategy will pay off for them. Think of this as Among Us or Project Winter, but with SCP Foundation lore, and you get some idea, where players must work together in order to escape, fighting off anomalies, and activating elements in the environment. However, of course there is a traitor element in this game, where one or more of the survivors are anomalies and have to stop the other players. There are also different roles like doctor or engineer, and there is limited line of sight, which does add to the tense minute-to-minute action. They have been running playtests throughout December, which seems to have been well received, so if you're in the mood for a game like this, do check it out. Other games begin with Annihilate The Spance. Yes, that is not a typo, since this is an RTS base builder with limited control. For the most part, you are building out and expanding your production capabilities, which in turn produces autonomous ships, which you can then direct and give instructions to on a grand scale, but are unable to directly control any one unit. The ships will prioritize their own action that they want to take, with the constant, endless unit production aspect of this looking pretty neat. Also, this is focused on a 40-mission single-player campaign, so it is not some endless or procedurally generated survival type title, so if you prefer more structure in your game, this might be right up your alley, and looks like the hidden gem of the week. This next title is of note since the two entries prior to Dealer's Life Legend, namely Dealer's Life and Dealer's Life 2, have been fairly popular, especially in the case of the sequel, with over 3,500 Steam reviews, and is a series of merchant simulation titles where you haggle with characters who want to buy or sell various items and trinkets. In this new version, they have layered on a fantasy theme, so you are haggling with dwarves and elves over magical items instead of the more modern day setting of their two previous games. You play as a travelling merchant here and can journey via caravan to different cities and towns, taking on various objectives and diplomatically positioning yourself between the different factions present in the world, and is of note due to the pedigree. I'm not quite sure what to make of Heroes of Hammerwatch II, since in case you were confused, developer Crackshell has two parallel series, Hammerwatch and Heroes of Hammerwatch, with the regular Hammerwatch getting a sequel which released in 2023, all of them being fairly similar looking 3/4 view action-adventure RPG with a fantasy setting, with the Heroes of series having more of a roguelite structure. This is your classic fantasy romp where characters like warrior, mage and rogue enter the ever-changing Dark Citadel to fight evil or something, having a run-based structure and extensive persistent progression in the form of a town which you can upgrade, as well as a gorgeous pixel art look. This next title is of interest since it comes to us from Flash game legend Nerduk Productions, where I realized that this is a solo developer out of Malaysia a couple of years ago, who has made the jump to Steam, so of course I want to give Kill a Million Rats a mention. Sure, it might have some Vampire Survivors inspiration in the whole million rats thing and the swarms of enemies the game throws at you, but this is a base building strategy defense title, where you play as the Spirit of Vengeance who has to exterminate all of these rats in order to save the villagers. The art style in this game looks very much like a Flash game, but I'm not dissing them for it, since it is in line with their other titles and has somewhat of a throwback charm, with the core action and strategy looking great. It feels like the developer of this game kind of gave up on naming their title, since Magicbook AutoBattler is a tug-of-war roguelite auto-battler in which you use a magic book to summon units to battle enemies. So yes, not exactly the most creative in terms of naming, but the core game does look good. If you're not familiar, this subgenre has a long history that can also be found in Flash games, as well as more recent entries like Operation Polygon Storm, in which you are summoning units and using abilities to push the enemy backwards, with this of course having a fantasy theme with bosses and monsters to battle, and looks like it has potential. The developer of Skystead Ranch did reach out, and I wanted to help them along, since one look at this game and it strongly reminded me of Viva Pinata. Yep, this is a garden building ranching title in which you are building up your ranch in order to attract and befriend quirky creatures instead of straight up capturing them and throwing them in a corral or something like in Slime Rancher. Sure, it might look kind of jank, but if you can get over the visuals, there might be something to this game, where I'm interested to see how much content there is here. It's an absolute killer of a lineup for the top 5 if I do say so myself, since we have games like Airborne Empire in this group, an open world RPG city builder that has you building, managing and growing your own unique city in the skies. This is the follow-up to Airborne Kingdom and appears to be an expanded version of that game while still retaining what makes this series unique, namely having to build a flying city. Elements like lift, balance and propulsion have to be considered, along with defenses against sky pirates, which is in addition to city building style systems to manage, such as the threats of fires, sickness, injuries, morale, and even the amount of light in the city. There is a vast and rich open world full of new dangers, exotic wonders, and many hidden treasures to explore as you fly around the world and interact with the people living on the ground, taking on objectives, and helping the people in order to gain new technology, all on your path to become the capital city of a harmonious empire. Do note that it will be an early access release and is planned to be in it for more than a year, so let's see how much content there is at launch and how it develops over time. A cool looking roguelite Souls-like title is Tyrant's Realm, combining the deliberate stamina based combat of the FromSoft games with roguelite style randomization and replayability, but does also have a visual style inspired by the PlayStation 1. Of course, it isn't as low fidelity as something like Kingsfield, but is more stylized instead, but does still have the expected grimdark gothic setting, as well as some truly monstrous looking enemies, with an infinitely replayable Souls-like certainly having its appeal. This one's for indie game developers. The free indie game marketing resources are ready, so sign up via the link in the description below to get it in your mailbox. There is a tremendous amount of hype behind Aloft, since this is a survival game which continues to dominate in terms of mass appeal even in 2025, with the gimmick of this game being that you're able to turn any floating island into your ship. Yes indeed, it is set in a world of floating islands, and it appears that any random one of them can be turned into your home base as you punch trees, gather resources, and craft your way up the tech tree to get strong enough to fight back a fungal corruption. The exploration in this game looks neat since you have a glider to soar around, although I do wonder what will happen if you fall all the way down, and in survival game fashion will be an early access release. Speaking of anticipated titles, we also have the early access launch of Hyper Light Breaker, the next title from Heart Machine, best known for Hyper Light Drifter, and is set in the same universe, even if it is a very different kind of game. This is a third-person action roguelite with co-op support, where you explore the ever-changing overgrowth to get to and defeat the Abyss King, looking pretty sleek overall. Heart Machine has ballooned in terms of size and is a far cry from the small team that made Drifter back in the day, and along with that comes bigger and bigger ambitions, where they too have had their share of layoffs, so hopefully with the launch, things will get better for them. 2024 was not that good for the Metroidvania, so here's hoping 2025 will be much better, and we have a good chance of that happening with the release of Blade Chimera. This comes to us from the developer of Touhou Lunar Nights and Delit in Wonder Labyrinth, both great search action titles in their own right, with the occult cyberpunk setting of this game looking sick, while still retaining their signature pixel art style, which is absolutely gorgeous. Watch this video for more upcoming pixel art games.